she takes him on a tour of Mohenjo-daro. Professor Lal wanted to know, when did the Kalimanga decay? He got a team from Italy, Robert Rakes and a group of hydrologists and geologists, find out when did Saraswati die. And that's how he comes to a conclusion that the Harappan people were the Rigvedic people. Geographical layout of Harappan civilization, geographical layout of Rigvedic people, the period is the same.
There is a huge amount of evidence of Indian maritime activity. In fact, as I often say, there is a good reason why India is the only country in the world which actually has an ocean named after it. Then I took the plan to the Honorable Prime Minister, and he then looked at me and said, okay, do it. And then after another 20 seconds of silence, he said, Dubna mat.
From Zonkar Choudhary Monastery, Mysore, Karnataka state, they would be simultaneously reciting prayers for the lamp lighting. The prayer includes verses of auspiciousness and lamp lighting ritual, offered for the smooth running and flourishing of the divine activities.
Tene jitenge tashe tangbo de nyawa tembe jarame ba jiten sona tashe la tame shikje tamba kigo la shewa tene jitenge tashe nyewa wa kendi tamba cheten tebe tashe mida la da lama inje chebe ne soje chala ngoza chata pa tene jitenge tashe samba wa nyemondele tsendele nyinzeko tele nyinzen tato
Before we begin, a short reflection on the extraordinary legacy we honor today. Professor B.B. Lal stands among India's most respected archaeologists, with a career extending across 8 decades of research, discovery, and scholarship. His pioneering work, from major excavations to contributions in Harappan studies and archaeological methodology, reshaped the understanding of India's ancient civilization. Recipient of the Padma Bhushan and the Padma Vibhushan, his influence continues through his numerous publications and the scholars he inspired. This memorial lecture series was started by the students of University of Delhi who were inspired by his works to commemorate his legacy and to encourage future generations to engage meaningfully with Indian archaeology and heritage study. To continue the reflection on his life and contributions, now I would cordially invite Air Vice Marshal Retired Shri Rajesh Lalji to kindly introduce late Professor B.B. Lal to our esteemed audience.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to first welcome the chief guest, Shri Yaduvir Singh Yadav, Director General, Archaeological Survey of India, Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, Director General, National Maritime Foundation, Professor Himanshu Prabha Ray, First Chairperson of National Monument Authority and Senior Maritime Archaeologist, other guests and members of the committee. What do you say about a person born in 1921 and writes his 20th book in 2021? Professor Lal's book, Aryo Ka Adesh, was given to the publisher in 2021 and unfortunately, because of COVID and other reasons, couldn't be released, and he passed away in 22. One of the great things that he taught us family, and he didn't lecture us to do that, was use it or lose it. A very important emphasis on mental alertness and physical fitness. Other great thing that he taught us was give and serve, but expect nothing in return. It just reminds you of the Shlok Karmane Vadikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachan, chapter 2, 47. He told us to be righteous upright in integrity, honesty, ethics, and morality. And he said, there's only one way to do things, and that is the right way. But before I go further, I think I'm going to start my introduction of B.B. Lal. Right. The first 25 years, born to Sri Ramcharan Lal and Saryu Devi, and he was good in studies, came first all the time, first in class, and he was awarded a scholarship at the Allahabad University. He was good in dramatics, football, cricket, hockey, and everything that he took part in. One of the features of his interesting feature was house arrest, trying to take part in the distribution of pamphlets. He did not get a first division in mathematics that he wanted. However, he got first division in Sanskrit, and he was offered scholarship over there, and which he took, and once again came first class first in the Allahabad University. Sir Mortimer Wheeler came to India to take over the Director General of Archaeology, and he went scouting for young blood across the universities. And he picked up Professor Lal, or then Raj Basi, for the Takshila camp. After the training, he joined the Archaeological Survey of India as the assistant superintendent. And his first assignment was at Harappa. So we're talking of 1946. His career and work included the Harappan that was understudy to Sir Mortimer, Brahmagiri, Shishupalgarh, 48, sites connected with the Mahabharata. Hastinapur and Indraprastha were excavated, other sites were explored. Then he went on to Nubia for a 6-month excavation, came back to do a Sindhu Saraswati civilization excavation at Kalibanga. He asked for a voluntary retirement. He went to Jivaji University, where he excavated and explored areas around Jaderwa and Gupteshwar. And the final thing that he was so keen was there is sites connected with the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Mahabharata having been done in 51-52, this was in 77 onwards. I must tell you about my mother, Kusum. She, accompanied him to all excavations from 1951. Each and every excavation, each and every month, and each and every time there was a camp, she was there. She not only became a personal assistant, so to speak, to my father, and she knew exactly how to record things stratigraphically and where found items. And she would complete her drawings before the end of the day. She developed a good eye for exploration, spotted Stone Age tools in Gupteshwar and NBPW and PGW elsewhere. And finally, she suffered medically quite a lot and passed away in 2016. Professor Lal worked his way, became the youngest Director General of Archaeology at 46. And after 5 years, he opted to come out of the administration work and join Jivaji University. Let me tell you about his books. He's written 20 books. A couple of his interesting books, or most revealing books in terms of archaeology to my mind, was the Rigvedic people, invaders, immigrants, or indigenous. I'm going to share some of his writings on this book a little later. Honors awards, in brief, 2 titles, Mahopadhyaya and Vidyavarad, 2 DLIT St. Petersburg and Deccan College. First felicitation volume by Sri Krishnakant, the Vice President, in 1997, followed by another one by the Vice President in 2019. Lifetime Achievement Award by Prime Minister, and Padma Bhushan and Padma Vibhushan. Something personal here about him was he and Mr. Deshpande were colleagues at Takshila, right from 46 onwards. And they became colleagues and they became Sandhis. Mr. Deshpande's daughter is sitting here, my wife. Again, through Mr. Deshpande, he met his guru, Gurudev Ranade, who was incidentally a mystic. He was also the Vice Chancellor of Allahabad University. He learned Word or equivalent of Word as late as the age of 76. He learned PowerPoint at the age of 83. He did his knee surgery at the age of 89. He did his spinal surgery at the age of 90. Just go ahead and do it. Okay. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, it's good. If it works out, it's good, whichever way you look at it. So that was his spirit, way of life. And of course, one of the great things he did was he introduced us to Bhagavad Gita, which we still read on a daily basis. Okay, this is interesting. I wonder how many of you know this. The poet and Professor Lal, he wrote a poem, Whisked Away by a Damsel. And this was, I'll just read the first two stanzas of it. On a cozy bed one wintry night, I lay in cashmere blanket wrapped, and lo, the room turned with a light, and as some one at the door had tapped. Come in, I said, and in came a lass with necklace dangling around between her breasts. Had she transparent or no dress, in slimness she surpassed all the tests. So she takes him on a tour of Mohenjo-daro. Okay, I think there's 7 stanzas on that. And at the end, so drunk was she, and so was I, that consciousness loosened its grip. She in my lap began to lie, something felt close to lips. Just then sweet Kusum didn't to me, get up my love, what makes you scare? Here's a morning cup of tea, your Indus talk you must prepare. Okay, so that was one. And then he had written 100 verses on Sindhu Saraswati civilization. That remained unprinted. We used to ask him, do you believe in spirituality? He says, no, I don't believe it. Show me a God, I'll believe in him. So that was always a line of argument, but we always knew that he was so close. When he's sitting across to him, he goes into a meditation. He just goes into a meditation mode. Look at what he writes in the epilogue of his book. The moving finger types and moves on and on. I'm only a typist, the dictation giver is someone else. However, the ego thinks that it is the dictation giver, since it holds that it makes the mind and intellect move. But can these faculties function without the backup of life force? Surely not. Indeed, it isn't the life force, call it Atma, God, whichever name you please, that imparts light and sound to the functionaries, and thence emanates the enlightened sound which transforms itself into words. They flow out unhindered, and the moving finger types, just types. Through the Sadguru's grace, I have realized that this great truth, that I am only a typist, the dictation giver is someone else. And that's how the power behind him, that's how he felt every time he wrote. Just 3 of us, 3 brothers, and the 3 daughters-in-law. There's a very good picture that I have. I love it. Both of them in the hospital after knee surgery. Okay, I'm going to spend some time, short time on Rigvedic people, invaders, immigrants, and indigenous. Chronologically, if you remember, Max Muller had said that the Aryans came to India in 1500 and the Rigveda was written in 1200. When the Indus civilization was discovered, it was discovered and dated to 3rd millennium BCE. So obviously it was assumed that the Rigvedic civilization and the Harappan culture had no relationship to each other. And then, of course, I won't go into the reasons that he has given how the Aryan invasion did not take place, because we agree this not done and dusted factor. I'll come to the key question, the relationship between Harappan and the Rigvedic people. Remember, the spread of Sindhu Saraswati civilization is from Ganga, Yamuna, Dwab on the east and goes to Indus on the west, covering all the rivers through. As the Ganga, Yamuna, Dwab was when the civilization started to decay and people started to move out for a better place, and where the rivers were, Alamgir and Ulas are examples. When excavating Kalibanga, Professor Lal wanted to know, when did the Kalibanga decay? Now it is very evident that Kalibanga decayed because Saraswati by its side, now river Ghaggar, Saraswati had decayed and it died down. So we got a team from Italy, Robert Rakes and a group of hydrologists and geologists find out when did Saraswati die. They bored holes into Ghaggar. I think 8 holes they bored. And Rakes' findings are published. The title of that is Kalibanga, Death by Natural Causes. And the year given was 2000. Kalibanga died, obviously, because Saraswati died. So it can be presumed, he wrote to say that it is well understood that the Saraswati was a dead river by 2000. And the Mandal 7 of Rigveda describes Saraswati as a mighty flowing river from mountains to the ocean. So if it is a mighty flowing river, it was plausible to date it to around middle of 3rd millennium BC. Then comes the next point. What does Rigveda say about its land? Oh, this is in Mandal 10, 1075, verse 5 and 6. From the east. Oh, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shatudri, which is Satluj, okay, Parushni Ravi. Then you come to Askani Chenab and Vitasta Jhelum. Move further westwards, and they are all listed, all the tributaries that go and join the river Indus. Now, if you describe the geographical layout and the layout of the Harappan culture, which again was from Ganga Yamuna Dwab to the east, Rigved from Ganga Yamuna Dwab to the western sector, to the river Indus. They are congruent, as you will see in the next slide. There's the layout of, there's the spread of Ganga Yamuna civilization, civilization, and the Rigvedic people. So the Harappans and the Rigvedic people were the same. The period was same, middle of 3rd millennium BC. And that's how he comes to a conclusion that the Harappan people were the Rigvedic people. That is the conclusion of this book. So I thought I'll bring this out, because quite a few people do not think so. But I think this argument of his, geographical layout of Harappan civilization, geographical layout of Rigvedic people, the period is the same, middle of 3rd millennium BC. What else can it be? So with that, I say thank you to Paul to allow me to introduce Professor Lal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such a beautiful honor to his legacy. Now, I would cordially invite our chief guest for today, Sri Yaduvir Singh Rawat, Honorable Director General, Archaeological Survey of India, to kindly present his tribute address in honor of late Professor B.B. Lal.
Namaskar. It is my privilege to welcome you all to this year's Padma Vibhushan Professor B.B. Lal Memorial Lecture Series. As we gather here on 3rd Memorial Lecture to celebrate scholarship, discovery, and the enduring quest to understand India's deep past, we also pay homage to a man whose name has become synonymous with Indian archaeology itself. Professor B.B. Lal was not only a pioneering archaeologist but also a visionary who reshaped the contour of our understanding of ancient India. His work spanned more than 7 decades, and in that time, he produced research that permanently altered the way we conceptualize our past scientifically, culturally, and intellectually. Professor B.B. Lal's most significant contribution to Archaeological Survey of India was the transformation of Indian field archaeology into a more scientific, methodological, and multidisciplinary discipline. As Director General of ASI, 1962-72, he modernized excavation procedures, standardized documentation, and encouraged the integration of geology, paleobotany, and radiocarbon dating into the archaeological work. His major excavation at Hastinapur, Purana Killa, Shishpalgarh, Birwanpur, Kalibanga, Gilun, Ayodhya, Bhardwaj Ashram, Sringbirpur, and other sites provide foundational culture sequence for India's prehistoric and early historic period. Lal's work at Kalibanga illuminated pre-Harappan origin and unique features such as plowed fields, while his studies on PGW culture at Hastinapur shaped later discourse on Mahabharata period archaeology. Through the Ramayana site project and UNESCO Nubian campaign, he expanded ASI global and interdisciplinary engagement. Equally important was his mentorship, training many archaeologists who later led ASI. Together, these contributions made him one of the institution's most formative figures. Professor Lal served as one of the youngest DGs of ASI after independence when he sworn in as DGSI at the age of 46 in 1968 and relinquished the apex post just after 5 years in 1972 when he was still having a long service ahead of him. That was the beauty of Professor Lal, that he chose to devote most of his time after leaving ASI to unveil the buried mysteries and academic publication which had been discussed since long there before. One of the greatest contribution of Professor Lal lies in his post-retirement publications, where he was one of the few scholars who challenges the Aryan invasion migration theory and penned seminal books like Saraswati flows on, the earliest civilization of South Asia, the homeland of Aryans, how deep are the root of Indian civilization, to name a few. Regarding Aryan civilization and Harappa, this actually I often think, if Max Muller was born after the discovery of Mohenjo-daro Harappa, what would have been the scenario? That is actually one big question, because he actually conceptualized that before the Harappan was known. I think that would have been a different flow of the civilization. This year lecture series theme, Pathways Through the Past, Trade Routes, Connectivity and Archaeological Legacy of the Early India, is in many ways a reflection of Professor Lal's own approach to the discipline. He was among the first to emphasize that archaeology is not merely the study of isolated sites, but of networks of people, ideas, technology and cultural expression that connected region and shaped civilizations. And it is actually turning true now. Archaeologists are focusing on this now. And we are knowing, recently we have written a book, one article on Karwan Sarai in Kutch. We have found a small rural settlement, and that indicate actually there were on the trade route small hamlets. We were actually refueling those caravans. That has been published recently, and it is coming out. Actually, our Harappan culture we saw just few days back. It is now changing. We have got so many gradual development of this civilization, and then we can say it is a indigenous origin. It is not the foreign or it came from the outside. That's why we should go to in the micro level. That is need of the today's actually the research. Not to prove this is the I am right actually because I am opposing this. They are not Indian. They came from the other side. That kind of thing required lot of actually more research, because we have excavated so many sites. Now this is the time we analyze the material and then make our theories, new theories. That is the actually need of the hour. Professor contribution to the state of Indus Saraswati civilization, the painted grave culture and historical urbanism opened new horizon for understanding how ancient communities interacted with their landscape and with others. His excavation at Kalibanga, Hastinapur, and numerous other sites revealed pattern of movement, trade, and settlement continue to influence archaeology debate even today. Even in Harappan civilization, actually, earlier we were thinking it is a very standard type of development, urbanization in all over the continent, subcontinent. But it is not. We have got regional variation of this culture. Actually, fortunately, I have worked in the Saraswati Valley also, Saraswati Rishadvati Valley, even the Western India also. You will feel actually that once you go from the North Indian side, excavate in North Indian side, and then go to Kutch, Gujarat, you will not feel that it is a different situation there. But technologically, they are at the same level. That is true. But geography played the major role in the shaping of the local economy, local technology. That was there. What made Professor Lal extraordinary was not simply breadth of the excavation experience, but the methodological clarity and intellectual courage he brought to each project. In an era when archaeology in India was still defining itself, he insisted rigorous stratigraphic excavation, carefully documentation, and the use of emerging scientific tools. His leadership gave Indian archaeology its institutional strength and global standing. At the heart of Professor Lal's scholarship was an abiding curiosity about how ancient society connected with each other, whether examining the transition from Harappan to later Harappan phase, mapping settlement pattern across the Gangetic plain, or studying the material correlate of early state formation, he constantly highlighted the dynamism of ancient India. He saw movement, change, and interaction where earlier narrative had status. This year's theme on trade, route, connectivity, and archaeological legacy invites us to continue that line of inquiry. Early India was a land of pathways, riverine corridor, land route, coastal link, and trans-regional network that facilitated the exchange of goods, religious ideas, technology, and artistic tradition. Archaeology has revealed an India that was never isolated, but always in conversation with itself and with the wider world from Central Asia to Indian Ocean rim. As we explore these pathways through the lectures, papers, and dialogue of this series, we also walk in the intellectual footsteps of Professor Lal. He taught us that archaeology is not merely about unearthing things, it is about understanding how human society evolve, adapt, and innovate across time and space. I myself was fortunate to have got my training at Singbirpura under Professor Lal, and since then, be it in at Dholavira site during excavation or otherwise, I have had the blessing of and guidance from him. He was very meticulous person. Actually, my first experience after doing my MA was actually Singh excavation. I met him after coming Dehradun to Delhi, and second day I got chance to actually and request him to actually give me some permission to attend the Sringvirpura. And after a short interview, he asked me to go to Allahabad, Khusro Bagh, and next day I will come and pick up you. So that was my journey with Professor Lal, and I spent whole one season at Sringvirpur and learned many things of the excavation, stratigraphy, photography, even how to draw. These are the all different aspects of excavation. And he was so actually was deep into it. He wanted everybody to be that much perfect. That's why the once you go into the trench, till Lal Sahib is around, nobody will dare to come up. That was the actually the Lal Sahab's discipline. For archaeologist and researcher, Professor Lal remain an enduring source of inspiration as the Archaeological Survey of India moves forward with new technology, expanding fieldwork, and a broader vision for heritage stewardship. We remain deeply indebted to his foundational work. On a personal note, and on behalf of the entire ESI, I want to express our profound respect and admiration for Professor Lal legacy. His scholarship on not only his publication and exhibition but in the countless student and professional he trained and influenced. His vision continue to shape our mission, our methodology, and our aspirations. As we inaugurate this year's memorial lecture series, let us reaffirm our commitment to the value he championed: scientific integrity, intellectual openness, and a dedication to uncovering the many layered story of India's past. Let us use this lecture to deepen our understanding of the roots, literals, and conceptual that connected our ancient work. And let us remember, as Professor Lal often reminded us, that the past is not a closed chapter, but a continuing dialogue. I thank you all for joining us today and look forward to the insightful discussion ahead as we honor the extraordinary legacy of Professor B.B. Lal. Thank you.
First of all, let me, on behalf of Professor B.B. Lal Memorial Committee, welcome you all to the third Professor B.B. Lal Memorial Lecture. So let me read out the other members: Dr. B.R. Mani, Dr. Swapan Dasgupta, Professor Shobit Mathur, Dr. S.K. Manjul, and Air Vice Marshal Rajesh Lal, who you heard a bit earlier. Let me specifically welcome our chief guest, Shri Yaduvir Singh Rawat, our guest of honor, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, and of course our speaker of the day, Professor Himanshu Prabha Ray, to this extraordinary event. I have the honor of presenting something which Professor B.B. Lal would have loved to see. Unfortunately, he did not live to see it, but it was something that was in the plan while he was still alive during the COVID years, which is the building of a ship called INSV Kaundinya. So you will see photographs flipping at the back. These are photographs of this. And so let me explain what this ship is all about. So as many of you have heard, we have an ancient civilization going back to the Sindhu Saraswati period. But what is often forgotten that this civilization was not entirely a landlocked civilization. In fact, it was, at least in part, a maritime civilization, particularly the part of it in and around Gujarat coast and the Makran coast. There was a lot of maritime activity, and there's plenty of evidence of ships from the Harappan sailing up to the Persian Gulf and to Oman and so on. And from then onwards, through the Iron Age, through into the historical period, there is a huge amount of evidence of Indian maritime activity. In fact, as I often say, there is a good reason why India is the only country in the world which actually has an ocean named after it. And of course, through the course of these millennia, we sailed, of course, westward towards the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. We also sailed the other way to Indonesia, all the way through to Japan and Korea and China. And there's lots and lots of evidence of this. And of course, some of you may even have read my book, Ocean of Churn, which lays out this story. The question then arose is, what kind of ships did we use to make these great voyages? So, as a part of my research, I began to dig into what was the earliest ship that we can reasonably have a good sense of an Indian ship that we really have some evidence on. Now, of course, as I said, we have evidence of our sailing and visiting the Middle East during the Harappan period. And of course, there is the evidence of Lothal, there's the evidence of Dholavira, which was a big port, and so on. But the problem is we have very little idea of what those ships look like. We have evidence of riverboats, and very often people tend to present riverboats as evidence of maritime activity. But let me tell you, now that I have heavily been into this shipbuilding space, there is no way to confuse one with the other. The evidence of what a Harappan ship is very, very thin on the ground. Most of it, as I said, is of river boats. There is one almost scratchings of something that could be interpreted as a ocean-going ship, but it's too vague to be able to tell very much of it. And there is one mud toy, you can call it, or a model from Lothal, which also may have been a ship-going, ocean-going vessel, but there's just too scant to be able to recreate it. And as I said, there is no way to use a riverboat to recreate ocean-going ship. They're totally different architecture. So I kept digging, and I discovered that the earliest evidence of what is something that could be recreated was actually from a Satvahana period coins. So we looked at that. There is you can Google that up quite easily. And then a little bit later, from the 4th century or thereabouts, from the Ajanta caves, 4th, 5th century of Ajanta caves, of actual ships being painted. There is also descriptions by foreign travelers of ships, what these ships look like. And then there are some texts like the Yukti Kalpataru from even later, 9th, 10th century, Raja Bhoj, of what these ships may have looked like. So triangulating all this information, there is a few things we know about them. The first thing is that Indians used a peculiar technique to build their ships, which is stitching. They did not nail their ships together, and many foreign travelers, as well as in our own text, it's very clearly shown that we, even though we were one of the few countries in the world which actually had rust-free nails technology, and we occasionally did use nailed ships. So it's not like we didn't know how to build them, but for reasons we can debate, they almost always stitched their ships together. We also know that we did not use rudders, at least in the early period. We used a trailing oar, which is true of the Mediterranean ships and of other civilizations as well. And at least in the early period, till at least the 10th, 11th century, we used square sails, not Latin sails, i.e. those triangular type of sails. We used square sails and square rigs to build our ships. So with this information and some help from other projects like this, like the one that the Omanis had done of an ancient dhow that they had recreated, I decided that let me try my hand at naval architecture. So I designed a ship, a stitch ship, as I said, based on this very scant information, some coins, a painting, some texts and so on, and built a ship. Now for this, I received thankfully the support of the Ministry of Culture under Project Mausam, and they gave me some financing for this, and the Indian Navy, which very kindly said that they would help me do the project management for it. Then I managed to convince a shipyard called Hodi in Goa to take up this somewhat mad project. So I took this plans of this, and do remember that I am a trained economist. I'm already stretching myself as a historian, as people in social media keep reminding me. But naval architecture may have been considered a step too far. So in order to convince people that I actually knew what I was doing, this was, I think, in 2023, I went to IIT Delhi and requested their naval architecture school to allow me to give a lecture on ancient naval architecture. And so I gave a technical lecture, which is also online. And not only did I talk about the history of it, I also partly included in there all the mathematics of it, including the Navier-Stokes equations. And then I waited to be torn apart. But it turned out that, at least on paper, my plans passed muster. So then I felt a little more reassured. And so then I took the plan to the Honorable Prime Minister. Usually I present to him on economic issues, but I slyly slipped in 5 minutes on this somewhat insane idea of making this thing. And he then looked at me and said, okay, do it. And then after another 20 seconds of silence, he said, Dubna mat. So with that encouraging support from all these parties, I then attempted to build the ship. You will be pleased to know that the ship has been built, and in April it was put in the water and it didn't sink, somewhat to the surprise of some people maybe. And then it has now been inducted into the Indian Navy as INSV Kaundinya. You can see photographs of it, and let me say that it's a pity that Professor Lal having crossed the 100th year, did not stay on for just a couple of years, because I'm quite certain he would have thoroughly enjoyed this particular voyage, and maybe we would have, I'm sure he's the sort we would have managed to convince him to even be a part of the crew. But nonetheless, in his memory, let me say that welcome once more to the third Professor B.B. Lal Memorial Lecture. Thank you very much.